Okay, well, we appreciate you coming today. And we are here in the panel discussion for talking about higher educational institutes and substance use disorders. I want to allow our panel to introduce themselves, and we will start the discussion after that. So.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jody Carroll. I'm a native of Bell County, so I'm a proud Appalachian. I've lived in Appalachia most of my life and done most of my work here. I currently work at University of the Cumberlands. I have a master's in social work and I'm a clinical social worker. And I've been doing those things for a minute or two. I have 29 postmasters years of experience and 26 post LCSW. So I have a little practice wisdom that I hope y'all let me share with you today. And my angle is going to be a little different. I'm an adjunct professor, but my primary role in higher ed is providing counseling services. So I'm going to talk from that point of view, certainly.
Thank you. I'm James Davis, and I am also a native Appalachian from Manchester, Clay County, born and raised, never leaving if I don't have to. I always spent my career here and hope to continue to do that. My role is twofold as well. I'm an adjunct professor in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University, and I'm a high school principal. I serve a couple different populations of adolescents and young adults, and then young adults and post-high school adults. So I'm from an academic point of view most likely. But I want to share with you that perspective on the secondary, the high school student. Some of that flavor will have a little pandemic to it because they've been through a lot of emotional trauma the last couple of years, as most of our society has. But then we'll also talk about some different kinds of research that I've looked at that might help us consider some options. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Kathy Walzak. I'm here at Union College, and I'm a professor of psychology here and I teach in substance abuse and coordinate the substance abuse program as well as the professional counseling program here at Union. And again, it's one of those perspectives of we have probably about 61% first-time full-time students, and many, if not most, are from Appalachia. And we are seeing all kinds of different issues with regards to, I was just telling somebody the other day, we had one of our students this past fall, his mother died from COVID and his father died from opioids. And that was within a month of each other. And so that's not uncommon that we're seeing that. I'm not sure, I'll let you guys talk about that as well from your perspectives. But those are some of the issues that we're seeing right now. And feel free, I mean, we have a small group today, so feel free to make any comments, ask anything that you feel that you want to ask, things like that. So I'm going to let you guys do your PowerPoint presentations, and then we will talk a little bit more about some of the issues.
I'm going to start with Jody.
Okay.
Stand up where I can.
We'll turn this on.
See you a little better. Okay.
So yeah, that's me, and thank you to Union College for doing this Appalachian Recovery related event. This is fabulous. And of course, in typical Union style, they've pulled together so many different organizations and people from within the community to make it a meaningful event. And I think we'll all leave today having gained something that we didn't have before. So from a practice wisdom standpoint, throughout my 29 years of doing this work, I have been praying for something. So you ever heard the wisdom, be careful what you pray for? So I've been praying that stigma about behavioral health issues would be reduced, and that awareness and service availability and access would be increased. Really have been praying for those things since day one. And so God gave us a worldwide pandemic. And, I'm like, oh my goodness, what a horrible way to have stigma starting to be, it's like a slow turning ship. But it is starting to be impacted in a more positive way And certainly we have seen some increases in service availability and access for folks. So that's my wisdom for the day. Be careful what you pray for. I do have some slides that kind of focus a little bit on statistics, but hopefully not to the point that it bores you completely to death. I'm a member of the Association for University and College Counseling Center Directors, serving on their bylaws task force right now. That's a lot of fun. So I'm a little bit of a nerd, but I think the interesting thing about this slide is these are, I think the 16, if I remember correctly, counting the number of lines, something like that. Most commonly appearing issues when students seek counseling services from their on-campus counseling services or counseling center. And you don't see substance abuse on there anywhere. It's just not represented. Accurate, I don't know, this, the data suggests that it is. This one is from the Center for Collegiate Mental Health. It is operated at Penn State University, but it's a consortium of higher ed institutions who all have the option to directly contribute their data with, of course, permission from their respective IRBs to Penn State as that sort of clearinghouse. And then they, compile that data to create numbers like what we're seeing here. And again, I know it's a little bit small, but it's mental health trends. And so you see a lot of students, a fair amount of students have prior treatment, threat to self, threat to others, traumatic experiences, and last but not least, drug and alcohol. So it is the least, represented in one way of looking at this. But on the other hand, you do start to see some things that are a little bit more interesting from the substance abuse standpoint. So of course, binge drinking, 32.7% of students who present for services in their college counseling centers do self-report, struggling with binge drinking. So, we do have these issues. Couple more ways of looking at it. This is a scale that, again, the Center for Collegiate Mental Health does, and a Likert scale is used to get these numbers. So this is 0 to 5. And of course, depression, generalized anxiety, all these things are well represented. But I use the red arrows just to draw the substance abuse stuff out of the sea of information. And you see substance abuse in general, 0.59, something that ranked very low among all of these other types of issues. And even alcohol, 0.49. So college counseling centers are not seeing, a lot of prevalence of the use of their students who are seeking treatment. This one is a little different. It also is from the Center for Collegiate Mental Health. They really are, kind of the authority on that. And out of all of this list of issues, this one's different in that the clinicians measure this with a questionnaire. And different centers use it differently. Some do it only at intake, some repeat it every single time the person comes in, and then they contribute that data. But as you see the numbers go down, alcohol and drugs are the first two red arrows. And then at the bottom, addiction related to something other than alcohol or drugs, internet, sex, porn, those kinds of things. And so the red portion of the little scale is if a student reported whatever issue as their top concern, and then, they're allowed to check all that apply if it just appeared at all. And so these don't really gather a lot of attention from the treatment standpoint on college and counseling centers because they are, appearing with such less prevalence than a lot of the other issues. This one, so item number 23 out of this, no, this is the wrong chart, sorry. So this one is not from, one of the organizations that kind of a lot of institutions, higher ed institutions are members of. This was an individual study that was done, and it's talking about the 30-day prevalence for users, and this was self-reported. It's back in 2016, so pre-pandemic. And you start to see down around the middle, cocaine, if you follow that line across, is one of the few things where prevalence on one of the lines is higher among college students than it is other people in that same age range. And then again for heroin, amphetamines, but the difference is statistically small. And of course, then you get down to alcohol and you see that college students are really winning that battle, if that's such a thing. That's kind of backwards. But the prevalence of use over a 30-day period is greater. You know, no shock there from what we know about that typical college experience. You know, you want to live it up, best days of your life kind of thing. And so alcohol is definitely an area where we see more significant numbers where college students are out achieving their other age peers in that kind of use. Doesn't seem to be letting me click forward.
Go for it.
Okay, thank you for doing that. That looks a little better. So this is numbers that I decided to share a little bit from University of the Cumberlands. Our numbers very much, match what we're seeing from those, national clearinghouse type organizations. Anxiety, worry, panic, that's our biggest category. 73% of the students who present for services are identifying that. And then much lower, so if students come to us for sanction-related services, they've gotten into trouble, they've been mandated to go for counseling. We don't measure that in this, that's a different measurement sheet. But if the student decides to get traditional counseling services, in addition to their mandated class, then they appear on here. So someone who's mandated for drugs, we're only seeing 0.3%. And I've been at Cumberland's, my 5-year anniversary with them will be 3 days from now, so woo me. But in the 5 years I've been there, we've never had a referral for drugs other than marijuana, and we usually average 10 or fewer per year. We see far more alcohol-related stuff. And so down at the bottom, the red arrow pointing to alcohol, and just 1% of the students that we see are reporting alcohol. These are non-mandated issues. So non-mandated drug-related stuff, it's just not appearing on our radar at all. So the result is, we don't give a lot of attention from the treatment standpoint. So I'm also responsible for what we umbrella call outreach. And under that umbrella would be prevention, education, and awareness things related to mental health, alcohol, and drugs. So the Surgeon General's report, this is very recent from 2022, they say that higher ed institutions should be implementing evidence-based prevention interventions. And if some of you guys are from higher ed, you know that there's a federal mandate that colleges and universities, show their freshmen something that meets certain criteria. Is it Title, somebody help me out here. Title, not 9, Title 4. Anyway, there's a federal law that says we've got to teach them prevention and education related stuff as it pertains to alcohol pretty much as soon as they come in the door. And that makes a lot of sense. So there are a lot of companies out there who have products that do that, that are they're evidence-based products. Oftentimes I think almost always these days, they are an interactive type of software that the student does online as part of their freshman orientation class. So we do start right off the bat doing that, but I mean, I'm not saying it's, but the only reason University of the Cumberlands or any other institution does it is because we're made to, but we are required to do that, so it's hard to say, yay, we're doing a great thing there. They make us do it. And that's a good thing. I'm glad that they do. So providing treatment and recovery supports, we do offer services, but as you can see, we don't spend a lot of time, beefing up those kinds of specialty areas within what we do in our counseling center, because it's just not, in demand very much. And though, those statistics are not true just for me, all of my counterparts across the United States are sending in, similar results. So teaching accurate, up-to-date scientific information about alcohol and drugs and substance use disorders, medical conditions that can, be secondary conditions related to those. I don't know how great of a job we're doing. Obviously those things are all components within that freshman orientation piece that every institution has to do. But I think you're going to see a lot of variation other than that, because it is mandated, about how much that's happening. Not in academic settings, I'm talking about from a student services or student affairs point of view. How much are we offering those other things? Obviously students are students first. They go to any college for their education. But the social component of, what are they doing with the rest of their time while they're there, that's huge as well. So I don't really see a whole lot of other things. And all colleges spend some kind of money on, campus activities, clubs and organizations, even their athletics. So lots of resources really are poured into some kind of activities for our students. But I wasn't able to find a lot of evidence that there's great consistency or very much volume in substance use prevention and education, other than that required kind of freshman piece. And of course, enhanced training of healthcare professionals. We do that at Cumberland's. That's not what I think I can contribute most on the panel today. I know Kathy's going to tap into that. We offer some similar programs, but I'm not directly involved with any of those, so I'm not going to try to touch on that piece. So how can colleges support students recovering from substance abuse? I found a non-academic article when I was preparing for today, and from a magazine I'd never heard of, Yes Magazine. Found it online. And honestly, some of the things that were said in that article just really struck me, and I thought that they were very much worth sharing. They were kind of focusing on collegiate recovery programs, or CRPs. And until I read that article, I wasn't familiar with those. But apparently there are some institutions where they have very robust programs. I see some heads nodding. In the audience, you all may be more familiar with those kinds of things. Some institutions apparently even create an entire, environment, atmosphere, even just a culture kind of around the whole idea of being in recovery while you are a student here. And it just sounds fabulous. And so some of the things that, people were quoted as saying about those atmospheres, without the support system in place, trained counselors, peers, the odds are higher that a student who's in recovery would relapse. That makes sense. Students shouldn't have to choose between their recovery and their education. And here we are in Appalachia, in the heart of, where this thing is happening. Unfortunately, we are one of the places where it's still really higher than lots of other places. So should we, as institutions, be looking at more things we can implement for our students? Would we attract more students who are in recovery if we offered something more, more substantial, more structured? Would we maintain more students who might be in recovery and they just haven't formally identified that to anyone? Might we retain those students at a greater rate and see them, achieve their dreams and finish their degree if we were offering something more structured? I think the answer is probably yes. I had no idea that there were things like this. The key to sobriety is students' experience that go beyond pub crawling and tailgating. So this is a small town. We also are in a small town of Williamsburg. There is a pub in town now. I guess it's been there a couple of years. And I certainly hear, students mentioning it. But I think we are, still small enough and still small town enough that what we see as compared to a lot of larger institutions is probably, a drop in the bucket, but they're certainly here, our pub crawling and tailgating type stories. These programs, on the other hand, advocate and, put into structure things like sober watch parties, where they can still, be a fan of their peers who are on the sports team and cheer on their universities, whatever they're winning and doing well in athletics, without alcohol having to be such a big part of that. And that may sound unimportant. I know I'm 52 years old. If I go to a party to cheer on some team that I care about, I'm not a big athlete, but if I did that, I could care less whether other people are having alcohol or not. But for people who are typical age college students, traditional age, fitting in with their peers and social acceptance are really, really big deals. So things like this can be very meaningful. And so another person saying it was the life preserver that I needed when I was drowning. Something I didn't see represented in my formal research that I did to prepare for today was any mention of family members, and I looked. I didn't spend 40 days and 40 nights on it, obviously, but I did a fair amount of preparation. But something we hear a lot, just anecdotally, within our students who seek services, is that they, like Kathy gave an example, do have issues in their homes that are related to substance use by parents or other family members that really impact them. It impacts their ability to function academically, socially, and just the whole kit and caboodle. Difficulty focusing, worrying about their younger siblings. That comes up a lot. And, sometimes students just pack it up and leave because they feel such a responsibility to go home and care for those siblings so that they're, not removed or they're not neglected or, some other bad outcome. And students, even if their loved one is not currently struggling with substance use issues, if they have done so in the past, it can be really directly related to trauma for them. Of course, we know that there's an increased risk of abuse and neglect, but the substance use in their home, almost in and of itself, is really a trauma quite often for them. I know James and Kathy and I were both at an event that EKU hosted a few weeks ago, and I shared a story about just how many students that I work with. One in particular that just the way she expressed it, I'll never forget. When we reached a point where we had been working together for a long time, and she was talking about not just me but other people she had come to know, through the course of being at a university and all that. And she said, I just don't know how to trust people. I've literally never had an adult do something nice for me or say something nice to me without wanting something in return. And that something, could have been related to obtaining substances. It could have been related to sex, just all kinds of things. So her ability to trust people was not just injured. I would say it was the closest to zero I have ever personally worked with in a long career. So the damage is just incredible that these things do. So this, bear with me just a moment. The nerd in me is out again, but I'm currently working on my dissertation. I'm more than halfway done and getting close, but my focus is mental health outreach and specifically counseling center outreach. And of course, it's really, my expertise is more in mental health, but it's really more broad than that. It's behavioral health, so substance use issues are included in that. But something that occurred to me a few years ago is our vast focus on treatment. Counseling salaries are expensive. And when one student comes and spends an hour with me or one of my colleagues or my counterparts on any campus in Appalachian across the US, that's an expensive hour. We can only provide traditional services to one student during that hour. So it's a very labor-intensive way to provide services. And, I've enjoyed a great career doing that. I am not knocking that. I am a fan of that, and I want people to have increased availability and access to those services. But I also know that it is not the only way to address some of these problems. So categorically, the public health model offers us outreach. And, we've all seen our health departments really shine during COVID and all of the things that they did to kind of pull together the effort to resolve, what was happening. But we can also follow that top model in behavioral health, and we can offer more prevention, education, and awareness type things. So regardless of what your professional expertise or your career goals might be, we can all contribute significantly to what's happening with substance use in our communities, whether we're a behavioral health practitioner or not, whether we're a higher ed campus or a high school campus, we can all contribute to prevention, education, and awareness. I tried to look up numbers about funding, like how much are we spending as a country or as a state on treatment versus like prevention, education, and awareness. And I could not find that. So I thought I knew how to do research after all that I'm going through with my dissertation right now, but I had no luck with that one. But I would imagine that the difference is astronomical, that we spend a lot more on treatment versus those other things. But they have great potential to also make a difference. Was that my last one? So I guess my other little piece of practice wisdom is if we all, work together and bring our various types of expertise together, that's when we're more likely to start finding greater solutions that are more meaningful and lasting.
Thank you,
so
Jo.
much.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions at the moment? Yes, go ahead.
I did. I enjoyed that. Thank you for sharing. I want to go back to your opening comment. Be careful what you pray for.
Yeah,
That affirms to me you're a person of faith.
absolutely.
I am as well. God bless you for that. No reference to faith-based potential alternatives. Did you address what's your personal opinion about that?
So at the institution where I work, it's a Christian school.
We have kids on scholarship at your university.
Yeah, oh, good, good. So, we do have a lot of things that are non-drug and non-alcohol involved activity alternatives for our students. Probably, more than some others, maybe more than most. So we really excel at offering things that students can get involved in that are not tied to, drinking parties and, whatever the case may be. There's no direct acknowledgement within those activities of, this, you're doing this. One of the reasons to do this is drug or alcohol prevention. There's just no direct acknowledgement of that. And as a result, some of the students who could benefit for that reason, obviously in addition to others, just don't feel welcome or accepted there. They don't feel like it's an opportunity for them to share, maybe where they've been or what's going on within their home, their own past within those things. So they really feel, kind of ostracized and left out from some of those things. Yes.
Well, so I've worked, I was finishing my bachelor's degree at a public university in Kentucky. I believe in London. For the last year and a half of my bachelor's degree, this is back after I entered recovery personally, I worked with them to try and develop a collegiate recovery program at that institution. We got as far as designing a way that it was going to fund itself, taking advantage of the ACA expansion for anybody that was going to receive services there. And the staff pre-existed within the counseling service at that institution. However, when approached with the idea and the plans to administration, they refused to try and identify the correlation in the arrest of a student and how often that led to a student dropping out of college. They wouldn't even look at the data, even when we had, an IRB plan in place to look at it in an ethical way. And then two, just ultimately refused to discuss it. So trying to form that into a question, do you have a notion of why are public education institutions at an administrative level just to refuse to acknowledge that on college campuses there are untreated substance use disorder issues?
That's a great question. We should do a study about anybody. I am obviously a nerd enough to do it all again. That's a great question. And I don't know, my best guess, you guys tell me what you think, stigma. I think the administrators are normal human beings and have been affected by a horrible lifetime of living in stigma. And so they believe deep in their soul that it would be a bad thing to put the university's name on. That's my opinion. I think stigma is so powerful.
Yes, please go ahead.
This is being recorded, so I'll be cautious what I say, but I'm going to just tell you the dirty little truth about it. Some institutions benefit from the party culture, let's just be honest. They're ranked in the magazines every year. So let's just be honest. There are institutions that benefit from massive enrollment because they have a reputation of a fun place to be, the tailgating, the pub crawling, the whole deal, right? Ranked number 3 in Playboy magazine or whatever, right? So there's a benefit to that financially. So administrators can stick their heads in the sand, plausible deniability. That happens off campus. That's over on High Street, Rose Street, wherever street, Master Street. Just saying.
Hey, thank you for being honest. You
Well, I'm not
nailed
gonna lie to you.
it. You nailed it. That is.
Well, we
That's a
also
great point.
see issues of if we identify the problem, then we need a solution. And a lot of times, a lot of people don't know what the solution might be, so that can.
How about that?
Very brief follow-up.
Yeah.
There is a National Association of Collegiate Recovery Programs. We got to go to their conference. There's over 100 in the country.
Oh, wow.
And,
I had no idea.
Last comment, for your dissertation, I would highly encourage you to look at the role of peer leadership in deploying that public health model style to have that deep, meaningful impact with your student groups.
Yeah, and
Okay.
if you could send us the link to the National Association of
Yeah.
Peer Recovery.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk with you.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
So thank you.
I just need to say too, I think part of the problem with administrators, having been an administrator at public and private institutions, is the data you presented at the very beginning. It's not showing up, and students aren't showing up, even though we know it's there. And I think there's a lot of invisibility, or maybe counseling staff on college campuses are stressed already to deal with the depression, anxiety issues that are being presented there, and so they're not digging deep enough. I mean, this doesn't explain what happened.
No, you're exactly right, and that's why we wanted to try and draw the correlation to arrest and dropouts, because they drop out and then they're gone, and then so it looks statistically like it's not there.
Yeah,
but
right.
it's just because they're gone.
But Dr. Rushing's absolutely right. I mean, we see anxiety, we see depression, we see family problems, and we identify those, but we also need to address alcohol is causing a lot of that.
Yeah.
So.
I'm not an educator, not an administrator, not a counselor. I'm on the board at Southeast Community Technical College, so that's why I'm here today. But just in building a little bit on his first comment, the anxiety, depression issue that's number one. I have a son who is in recovery from drugs and alcohol. He was in addiction for about 10 years, and he's been in recovery for more than that time as a counselor now. He's a counselor for addiction recovery care. But he went to college in 1998. Opioids are like coming on by then. He was in school at Eastern. He switched and went to UK. He went to Bluegrass Community Technical College for a semester, went back to UK. He's in school for 4 years. Getting about 1.5 years of credits on, drugs and alcohol, partying. We don't know it's drugs. We think it's just alcohol. I don't know if he ever went to counseling, but had he gone, he would have presented anxiety, depression, worry. So how, and I know, with saying, okay, we don't want to look bad, we don't want to look different, we don't want to look like, we want to present ourselves in the magazines as whatever kind of school. How do you try to find out what's being fueled by drugs or alcohol or, how do you do that
Well,
in your hour a week or whatever?
We have an initial screening that every single student fills out when they come in, and it's about anxiety, depression, and all of these things. But it's also a drug and alcohol screening, that how much, how often, what substances, how and
So they have to tell you
that. Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those situations where it's like, hey, everybody fills this out, so I'm not singling you out or anything like that. So it's not any, it's not as much stigma at that particular point.
But does that always come across, I think that gets filtered down into the drug?
It can, but in a lot of instances, if we start seeing the person often enough, then they'll start being a little more honest, so.
It's easy enough to screen for, but until and unless we see a shift in the instruments that are being used on the scale, the large nationwide scale that produces those numbers, we may not see administrative decisions look much differently. I can just see them sitting there now. Well, there's no return on our investment. Why should we spend money on this?
I'll address that.
Nothing to see here.
I'm gonna let James do your PowerPoint now, so. And then we'll talk a little bit more.
Clicker, or are you gonna click on? Alright. So I'm James Davis. I'm pleased to be with you this afternoon. It is almost afternoon now. So if
Just
you'll
had
pull
the
up
12
full
o'clock
screen.
whistle.
Yes, yes. Get the shepherd's hook, just pull me off the stage. We'll get it down. So education has a critical role to play in informing, educating, preventing, intervening, solving some of these problems. It's incumbent upon us to do that. So I want to talk about several categories. Benefits of school-based mental health services. So I'm going to go on, put my high school hat on in just a minute. So empirical data and anecdotal observations, evidence of utility and effectiveness of school-based mental health services. We have moved away from a traditional guidance counseling model to also have a contracted mental health provider in the schools. That sounds wonderful, and I'm glad to have that in all of our schools. But as we talked a moment ago, the big elephant in the room of being divulging of what's going on is rapport. I don't know this strange counselor from such and such institution. I know my school counselor. That I'm not indicting the school counselor world. I'm saying we need to look at how we're training our school counselors. What roles are we asking them to provide? Is it testing all day long? 75% of the time. Is it guidance counseling? Is it classroom intervention? So what are we doing with our in-house personnel, and are they competent, qualified, and capable to do mental health services? Just a question. Saying I wasn't, just a question. Other questions here. So lots of studies indicate that nearly 20% of adolescents meet the criteria for a disorder. Data shows 7% of youth do not receive the services they need. I'm not going to read all this to you. You can have the PowerPoint later if you like. Parental involvement is essential in bridging those services. Again, stereotypical belief system out there in the community is I don't want my child talking about their problems at school because it'll get all over town. So we have these challenges, the stigma, okay, the credentialing. Some agencies may have a different reputation than others as far as confidentiality and who they know, and hopefully they're not violating FERPA and HIPAA, but there's stereotypical belief systems out there that it gets out. So I don't want my child talking at school. So there's a problem, okay? Several problems here. So findings show that parents were overwhelmingly supportive of schools being able to address them, okay? But if it gets out, stigma, they're talking about my child. So yeah, it sounds good on paper, offer the services, but my child's not participating. Okay, so it's kind of a conundrum there. So lack of parent support, understanding mental health services even exists among these so on and so forth. So here we're talking about providing services in the schools by qualified and competent in-house personnel when possible. Nothing wrong with the external agency. I'm just saying parents are reluctant, regardless of what some of these surveys tell you, having their children served by an outside agency in the schools. It just happens. I've been around the school for a long time, 20 plus. Yes.
Can I speak as a parent to that?
Yes.
I have a junior and a sophomore and a sophomore and a junior right now, and My younger one was just recently admitted to inpatient care for
Yes.
suicidal ideations.
Yes.
And I, as a parent, it's not that I was reluctant, they've been in counseling and all that stuff, but I also felt like I had to handle things, you know, and so I was like, I don't need that extra help at school, they're in therapy, you know, at the hospital, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
So I didn't put in the effort for the extra 504. And sometimes parents aren't educated about what the 504 can do, you know, if they think it's just academics, but it's not.
That's what I thought.
And so that's, as a parent, I agree, it's hard to know when it's okay to accept those services.
It's a challenge. And you were able to advocate on your child's behalf with an external provider, which is great. But it is a challenge to utilize a comprehensive approach there, school-based services and external services.
Yep. And knowing what's available at the
Right.
school.
Oh, yeah.
It's not everybody knows. I mean,
Knowledge
that
and
there are levels of the services when it comes to.
Not everybody has 3 or 4 counselors in a building either.
Exactly.
Lots of schools have one, or they have to
Especially not
share.
rural areas.
So what happens to little Johnny on Tuesday when the counselor's not there on Wednesday?
Right.
So again, I don't want to die to the school systems, but we do need to look at this.
Absolutely. And we need to educate our parents.
Absolutely. Parental influence, child relationships, again, data shows parents are involved, parents are engaged. It does make a statistically significant difference. You have a relationship building opportunity, and it's incumbent upon you as a parent to work with your children. You gotta bring them up, be responsible citizens, right? So we're talking about influence of parents to avoid some of these problems. Okay, it's critically important. So there are Family Resource Youth Service Centers. Are we doing parent workshops? Rarely, if ever, that I'm aware of. Are we doing specific targeted workshops on helping parents understand to identify problem behaviors and potential solutions? I don't think that's happening. If it is, it's rare, it's sporadic. So there's work to be done, even in that realm as well.
I'm smiling because I was sitting here thinking we did 1 in 7 years.
Yes, yes.
So-
Peer influence. Listen, folks, you do not have the influence of their peers. You can be a loving, caring, wonderful, doting parent or grandparent, caregiver, and provider, but you do not have the tools to compete with social media and their peers. So what do we have to be able to do? We have to be able to talk about who do they socialize with? What kinds of access do they have? When do they get a smartphone? Are they responsible with a smartphone? Are they allowed, so there's some parental responsibility here too, to engage their students, to work with their child and help them be responsible with who they hang with. Because you know the old adage, you're doing with the company you keep, right? So, that's just the reality of it. So we have some responsibility here too, and social media is so powerful. The TikTokers, the Instagrams, the Snapchats, I'm kind of a Facebooker. I like to have the most boring Facebook page on the planet on purpose. But all these other media sites are just sensational, often in a negative way. So, but they have access to that. Okay, so social media is desensitizing. You begin to objectify yourself. Faith. We talked about faith earlier. I want to make sure we touch upon that. Prevention, intervention, and recovery. A lot of that is augmented by a spiritual foundation, an opportunity to access spiritual support. Okay, so there's a component here where the faith-based community can provide those services. It can be a lay pastor. It can be a clinical licensed mental health counselor who has spiritual development background, theology degrees, whatever it happens to be. But we know that faith is important, not only in dealing with substance use disorder, but we talk about it in just life circumstance. Lots of social psychological research suggests that faith and social support is meaningful and substantial. So we know this anecdotally, but we also know this from the empirical literature out there too. So we know that there's impact. Okay. Implications, interventions, and solutions. We need increased resource support for in-school mental health counseling. Implementation of positive incentive programs for positive behaviors, and there are some of those out there. We just need to make sure that they are visible and are funded and supported. Resource centers and parent training for adolescent communication. How do you talk to your child? What do you talk about when they have these issues? We need consistent training regularly and often. Improve parental oversight of social media access. Enhance spiritual development and youth outreach from religious organizations. You know, we talk about the crisis in America, the fewer people going to church. It's like a third of what it used to be. The parent has to step up. If the parent can't step up, then somebody needs to help them step out and step with and get them out there. And so those youth groups can go out and share that information and have events. I know you can't necessarily go into schools and do that, but you can have all kinds of rallies in the community and encourage young people for, you know, the non-alcohol parties, the non-drug parties. You know, you can have some cool music, you can have some inflatables, you can have some great fun, and it can be non-alcohol, non-drug related, and they will come. If it's a hip, having a little event, they'll come because they can't afford to go anywhere else. And they're poor kids, and it's what's happening in town. So I'm gonna go check it out, and you know it's a clean environment, right? So we need to do more of that. Further research post-COVID, identify incidence rates in mental health and substance use in adolescents, develop novel new approaches to prevention for teens, and develop innovative recovery options. That's a big bunch of gobbledygook words, but we've got to do more. We've got to know what we're doing and do it well. And if we're not doing it well, we need to punt and do something else. So we've got to review what we're doing and come up with some new solutions. One of the things that Jody was mentioning a minute ago is the resources. Is three of the top items was anxiety, depression, and stress. All those are emotional responses to some antagonistic agent. Why are we not teaching coping skills? Why are we not talking about coping skills? Coping skills will not only help you ameliorate some of these issues, but if you know how to cope with peer pressure, with peer influence, if you know how to cope with these problems, then you might not get involved in drugs and alcohol either. Not just the emotional part, not just the stressful part, not just the self-esteem part, all these multi-dimensional components of the adolescent psychology. But if we can teach coping skills, and they don't, they melt down in a moment. They melt down, folks, in a moment. And they're looking for a scapegoat, or they'll tell a lie, or they'll blame someone else, or it's defense mechanism 101. Wasn't me. In denial. You know, Freud said that was number one, right? So we've got work to do, is in a nutshell. There are some things I believe we can do. I know Jody hit on some really important points a minute ago. Some of that data. We talk about administration. We talk about supports. I don't want to boil this down to money. It does take some resource funding, but it actually takes more people carrying than it does money. My thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. What questions do you have?
Hey, I gotta say again, I want to compliment both of you, and I want to thank you for your honesty above and going that. Hey, brother, we are, the whole reason we're here with this lady and Sandy in this group, we are the group that's doing what you just referenced. I've eaten so much crow in my life, I know when the taste is coming on, but we've been doing ministry for 26 years in rural Appalachian. And what led us to get into scholarship is at some point to break the cycle of poverty. Somebody's got to come from the outside to support all of you who are dealing with this and say, you don't have to drop out just because your mom and dad, your grandma and grandpa, you don't have to go to Harvard, Yale, UK, or UT, but you've got to get a high school diploma. But I'm haunted by something my dear dad taught me years ago, and he's in heaven, and you may have heard it. Son, we have to help people, but there's a point to where we can't push a rope uphill. And all this stuff that y'all work so hard to do, there's got to be a frustration of, you've got to have at some point, somebody's got to want to say, we need to make it better. You would not tell your kids, we would not tell our kids, this is stupid, trying to go to school. That's on the letters we get from the kids applying for a scholarship. So I commend y'all for being in education. It's just, I know it's hard, but I think the real life kind of things you're talking about, they're ever increasing. But I do believe, so even if it's a Pollyannish belief, there's got to be some kind of faith-based parameter that, everything else has failed. Why not give that a chance if that's the only way you look at it?
I think we all need to, we all need to have hope. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing.
You don't eliminate any tools in your toolbox. As any mechanic, they don't leave their tools at the house, they take them with them. So if faith is one of those tools, use it.
I liked what you said about teaching coping skills. Teach it in the middle school, teach it in high school. then they
Yeah.
get through high school.
Elementary
And by the
yeah,
time they get
all
to
of it.
college and they're away from home, they're away from
Yes.
mom and dad,
Yes.
good mom and dad, bad mom and dad, they've left the little brothers, sisters at home to fend for themselves, at least then the work on overwhelm, you know.
The traditional elementary guidance model did have counseling in the classroom regularly and often. But as they progress in the years of study in middle school and high school, it's more a detached approach. You get a referral to the counselor's office. They don't necessarily go in the classroom as often. So there becomes a de facto detachment from the counseling services and who they are. Do you know who your counselor is? You know, in some big high schools.
Yeah, and
1,600 students.
yeah, and if they get, and if they get referred for some kind of very extreme behavior, then that stereotypes as well, because, oh gee, look at that person, and they're the ones that are going to the counselor, but you want me to go to the counselor too. I'm normal, this person's not. So again, that stigma, yes.
And on that note, it's like, as a parent who's had 2 children go through a quality independent school system, until this year, it wasn't evident that my kids were going to use their counselor, because the only contact my counselors had with my kids was when they're going to test or when they're going to choose their next year's classes. So that's a problem.
It
You know,
is,
they should
yes.
be a lot more evident in middle school and high school. I don't like the detachment.
Yeah.
It's not fair to the kids.
Yeah, and to look at motivational enhancement, to look at positives, and to look at coping skills, and to look at the positives, and all of that. I mean, that's something that the counselor needs to bring into the classroom so that they can, so that's what they get associated with.
Well, I don't know if it's still this way, but when I was in high school, if you were particularly troublesome, and I know this now because I've had to do some things for my own children, but, if you didn't have like an IEP, some sort of federal law that was going to protect you, you ended up in what we call alternatives, which was a hot room above the band room where one of the sports coaches just sat with you all day long. And like, that's what you did. And like, there was no meaningful behavioral health intervention or anything to, I mean, it's very rare that I've met a person that was just bad. I can't tell you truthfully that I've ever met anybody that was just bad, like maybe one person in my life, but, and like zero tolerance policies drive those outcomes too. I mean, we have huge provider crisis in Appalachia, and then our parent base, those of them that are still alive anyway, or not incarcerated, our parent base, a lot of them aren't highly educated. And like, we do gotta be honest, like, I'm from Appalachia, I've lived here my whole life. Like, if you're a middle-class Appalachian, you know that you're better than all the poor people, and you don't deal with the poor people. And you ignore the poor people because they're trash, and that's how they're treated. And like, I mean, we gotta be honest about that too, but.
That's a real thing.
It's
I know
stigma,
it's a real
yeah, I mean,
thing.
yeah,
And I
it's,
mean,
yeah.
you can call it stigma and make it sound nicer, but.
But
like,
it is what it is, yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just a mountain boy, so we're all cousins, kinfolk, whether you choose to claim me or not.
That's true.
But good, better, ugly, we're all cousins.
But I guess my last comment would be, is like, this is something that keeps me up at night. Because I work with an adult population for substance use disorder, have for the past 7 years. We've got over 10,000 children in foster care in Appalachia, and we have the worst outcomes in the country for fatalities and just a whole slew of bad outcomes. I mean, nightmare stuff. And like, so many of those kids' parents are dead or incarcerated, and like, hopefully that's something what they're talking about in the other rooms, how do you reunite these people and rebuild these families, but I mean, they've been destroyed. And then you've got grandparents. We have horrible health generally in Appalachian, so we have very sickly grandparents trying to raise small children. And like, it is a heavy thing, and it's scary.
Would y'all say grandparents raising grandkids is at almost an epidemic level?
Absolutely.
And that's everywhere,
In
plus
this country,
country club? plus Country Club
It's
America.
It's not, yeah, it's not unique to Appalachia, but it's something that's, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we have a parental deficit in America. I'll just call it that, leave it alone.
yeah. Let's go ahead.
So you talked about the contracted people in the schools.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's what I do. I'm in
Yes.
Laurel County.
Mhm.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head. I graduated from the current district that I now work in. I didn't even know we were there until I graduated and started working there. And like you said, it's a lot of grandparents raising grandkids, and they come in and they get these referrals from the school, and like you said, they don't know we're there, they don't know what we do. We're this big, strange company coming in, and we're looking at them going, oh, your child needs to see us for counseling services. And then red lights start going off, and they're like, my child's troubled, they're gonna call social services, they're gonna get impact involved. And when in reality, like, I work with elementary children all the way up to high school children. And the elementary kids know, they come in my room, we play games, we teach coping skills. We host summer programs. And of course, people don't know we're there, but during the summer, we're always looking for things for our kids to do. So like, if any of these faith-based organizations or any libraries or anything in the community, we can step in as case managers and actually take them to these places. And so I think you hit it on the head of, they just don't know we're there.
Yeah, and I think so, and that's one of the things about this gathering today, is to find out what's there and who qualifies and how to get there. I'm sorry.
Well, and we do like those events. Like, I remember, I guess it was middle school, you know, they gave us a pretend job and like a pretend scenario. And at the end of the day, you either had money or you didn't. I didn't have money and I got a 0 bar. I think I even went to jail.
Writing bad fake checks, huh?
It was prophetic, but 0 bar was delicious. But like, you know, I believe that if we meaningfully want to address, you know, stigma and treat mental health as a part of life, you know, there are things that can be done in primary and secondary schools that are similar to that. And like, it doesn't have to be this big show, like we don't have to try and teach young children psychology, but, you know, just like, this is a normal part of life and it's okay.
Well, and you got to stop threatening them too, because I've had several people, you know, if you keep doing that, you're going to have to go see Dr. Walzak. She's the counselor, and you don't want to do that, do you? So we got to stop threatening them too. So.
I'll kind of echo and repeat, rehash what I mentioned. We have a lot of opportunities that we're not taking good advantage of. Some of those are faith-based programs. Some of those are external providers that we have agencies to work with us. Some of that, you know, working with parents so they know what's available and how it can help. So we've got some opportunities. Because you mentioned earlier, I believe, Mr. Thompson, is that right, Mr. Thompson? About stopping poverty and jobs. This I was raised up poor. I ain't ashamed of it. It's no fun. Poverty sucks. About a month, we worked 10 years, got a 4-year degree. And she gave me an opportunity. And I give my children an opportunity. We have to break that cycle. Somebody step up and say, not me. And for my family, it's my mother. And somebody else's family, I don't know who that is. But we have to help these people step up and step out into better opportunities. And what organization it is, I don't know. There's lots of them to help, and they want to help. But we got to maybe connect these people to these resources a little bit better than we're doing right now.
We have a Boys and Girls Club in Harlan. I don't know.
I've been there.
And that is probably one of the best as far as children, young children who have particularly incarcerated parents. They kind of go out and search for them, you know, to see if they can help them. But then they have all sorts of other programs for everybody, and they all blend in together, and you don't really realize, you know.
And they got a great after-school program, nutritious food.
And the summer program,
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I've been there a few
That's
times.
a good one, if you can get one in your area. Or if you have one.